I grew up in Southern California in Orange County, and a lot of people think that Southern California in the 70s and 80s was just this very hippy dippy place that was super lax, but it really wasn't. It was mostly military families and defense industry and extremely conservative. So my outlet was the ocean, and I just went to the ocean about every day in summertime and most days in spring and fall as well.
So, so ocean, I'm guessing that's how we get into the breathing. So what's the link? How did we get to that?
No, I was a terrible breather growing up. I had no idea how to breathe properly. I didn't know that there was such a thing as proper breathing, right? Nobody teaches you that in school. When I was growing up, the smog was so bad you couldn't see down the street, and we would have smog days instead of snow days where you would have to stay inside. So it was very surreal, sort of postmodern existence back in those days. But I was pretty sure I was mouth breathing throughout a lot of my youth. I know I was mouth breathing at night. I had teeth extracted. I had braces. I had headgear. I had retainers. And when I was growing up, it was never if you were going to do that stuff, but when, right? Everyone I knew was getting braces. I never questioned it. Wisdom teeth out, all the rest. So I never, ever thought about breathing when I was growing up. Not until somewhat recently did I ever consider that this was something that we could actually focus and that could improve our health and so much more.
So for you personally growing up, until you discovered it, what were the effects for you personally of like not realizing that we can breathe in a certain way to benefit us?
I think that I was wheezing a bit when I was younger. I never had asthma, official asthma, but there was always something going on with my lungs. I wasn't sure what it was. And so many other people had chronic respiratory problems that we were told this was just normal to have allergies, to have asthma, to have a stuffed nose, to snore, to have sleep apnea. You know, everyone else is doing it. Why shouldn't you be doing it as well? So it wasn't until much later in life, decades later, when I was an adult, that I started suffering from regular bouts of bronchitis and pneumonia, mild pneumonia, and more wheezing, still no asthma. And I was eating all the right stuff. I was sleeping 8 hours a night. I was exercising all the time, various sports, but my breathing just felt kind of off. And again, so many other people had these chronic respiratory issues. I thought that this was just a part of growing old, which sucks, but I was just going to grin and bear it.
Lovely. And so this is the book here, and graciously sent it through, and thank you so much for that. For me, I actually listened to this on audiobook. At the time I was in Mexico. It was I'm used to really cold weather. It was like 40 degrees, and I went on this run, and I could not run like more than 1,000 meters. Went back to the hotel, put this book on, and went for a run, and really focused on the nose breathing. It was very difficult, but I hit this stride, and I just carried on going, and it was so amazing for me. And after that, I was so excited to sort of talk about this. So it's based on a lot of science and a lot of history, and it's so interesting to hear the history of this. So first of all, how did we get to the point where you thought, right, I need to write a book about this, I need to share this information?
Yeah, you know, when you're a journalist and when you're a science journalist, you never think you're going to be spending 5 years researching and writing a book about breathing. It seems about the most boring thing you could ever imagine doing. And my agent told me so over several years. I said, you know, there might be this book on breathing. Then we looked, and there's so many other books on breathing. You know, they have 400 different practices. And I said, no, I think that there's a deeper story here that people aren't understanding, that I am certainly not understanding. I'm curious about it. She said, no, terrible idea. And so it wasn't until really years of putting together the pieces of this puzzle, and I kept finding articles, scientific articles, magazine articles, newspaper articles that were loosely associated with humans as a species losing the ability to breathe properly. And a lot of people think, what are you talking about? I'm alive right now, I'm breathing. But what I learned from researchers is that compensation, you know, just getting by, is very different than being healthy. We can just get by eating 20 cookies a day, right? But that doesn't mean we're going to be healthy. And so many of us are breathing in this very dysfunctional way that our bodies are able to survive, but they're not able to flourish. So that's where it started getting a lot more interesting for me. And finally, I convinced my agent. She thought, okay, there might be something here, and found an editor, and I went to work. I thought I was going to write this book in about a year and a half. It took me about 5 years. So so many revisions, because so much of my understanding of breathing and what science has understood about breathing over the years is wrong. And we know that now from the latest scientific discoveries.
So the modern day person, what's the average person? What are they doing that's just not natural? What's the average person doing?
The average person is breathing out of their mouth a lot, and there is a time and place to breathe through your mouth. When you're laughing, when you're sighing, that's totally fine. Sometimes at levels, upper level, zone 4, zone 5, you can default to mouth breathing real quick to get a burst of oxygen, right? To reset your respiratory system. Completely fine. I'm talking about chronic mouth breathing. I'm talking about the more than 60% of the population that sleeps with an open mouth, and the 25 to 50% of the population that habitually mouth breathes during the day while they're conscious. So that's really the number one thing. And then we're breathing too much. We're breathing too shallow. We're breathing in a way that we're just packing air into our lungs, but we're not exhaling fully. So there's a bunch of other things that fall off that tree, but first and foremost, it starts with breathing through your nose, and you'd be amazed by how few people actually practice this.
The book was such a trigger for me to consciously think about it, and it really did. The worst case scenario led to such a mindfulness that it was fantastic. But it, like I say, on that particular run, it transformed it. It was unbelievable. What sort of health complications does mouth breathing and the average person, what they're doing at the moment, what does that lead to?
When you breathe through the mouth, you tend to breathe very shallowly, right? So you take air in just into the upper parts of the lungs, and then you breathe it out. So when you breathe this shallow, you have to take more and more breaths just to get that oxygen you need to fuel your body. And there's been various studies that have shown when you breathe at a rate that's even considered normal, 18 to 20 breaths a minute, you are only able to use about 50% of that oxygen. The reason is so much of that air is just in your mouth, is in your throat, is in the bronchi, but it doesn't get to the lungs. So you're literally just taking air in and exhaling it without using it. So I think that is one of the major ones, and we can blame our modern lifestyles for that, because now we sit in front of Zoom cameras all day long. A lot of us are hunched over like this, right? Even if we want to take a deep, fulfilling breath, we can't. And then you develop this habit that your diaphragm, which is this muscle that lifts up and allows you to exhale and sinks down and allows you to inhale, that becomes only accustomed to working in this very small movement like this, right? And when we breathe this way, we trigger a stress response in our bodies. Because guess what happens when we were, a million years ago, when we were in the tundra and running away from saber-toothed tigers or whatever? That's how we breathe. But now we've been adopting this panic breathing throughout the day, throughout times when we aren't exposed to real danger, when your boss sends you a nasty email and you start breathing into your chest. And this is destroying our health. Chronic inflammation is behind, 95% of modern diseases. And chronic inflammation can be triggered by this low-grade stress. And that's what breathing this way will do to your body.